the kind of question I have. When we're talking about training the next generation of students for sciences in particular, what is the appropriate and best way to measure a student's mastery of material?
Folks. If you're watching this, I'm recording the night before Halloween to go out on Halloween. Happy Halloween, everybody. I hope you all are doing well out there. It's going to be a lovely Halloween for everybody, I'm sure.
So it's good to be back. I've had to be away for a number of personal things and lots of travel going on. So it's good to be back. And hopefully we'll be back and doing videos every week until the holiday, at least until Christmas time. But we shall see how that goes. Today, what I wanted to talk about came across my radar. It's been the talk of the week, really, as I saw it through Steve McGuire, who is an excellent follow if you're doing anything academic related. He does post quite frequently on some of the academics things going on. And why do I talk about universities? I've said it before, I'll say it again ad nauseum. I talk about universities quite frequently because they are the place where we train the next generation of scientists. So things going on in the culture of universities matter. It's also the place where we do an awful lot of scientific research in the United States. So, that's why talking about the universities. I want to see what the next generation of students in particular feel like is going on and things like that. And this crossed my radar because the Harvard University, has their Dean of Undergraduate Education and the Office of Undergraduate Education, which takes a look at grading and academic scores and things along that line from their students every year. And so in October, officially published, it still is October, excuse me, but officially published their new report on grading. And in particular, brings up the concerns over and over again about grade inflation, which is to say higher grades than perhaps are necessarily warranted given to student body or any number of different things going on. Now, this report that is mentioned here is about that. I'm going to show some of the things here from Steve's X, or rather Twitter, because the actual report itself is behind a wall here and on the undergraduate education website. Fair enough. I totally understand that. Here, it would be nice to see it out there publicly, but Harvard does what they will do with that, and that is their prerogative. But others apparently got access to it. So we'll have a look through that. But I also want to look at what is it? I think it's this one. Here from the Harvard Crimson, who was reporting on this. This is 3 days ago as of this reporting. So 27th in the morning. Harvard's college grading system is failing. Report on grade inflation says. More Harvard college students than ever are passing their classes with flying colors, but the college's evaluation system is failing to perform the key functions of grading, according to a report released by the Office of Undergraduate Education on Monday. The 25-page report, which was sent to faculty and Harvard College students on Monday, found that more than 60% of grades awarded to Harvard undergraduates are A's, compared to only a quarter of grades 2 decades ago. So 20 years ago, it was a quarter of the grades awarded were A's. Now it is 60%. That is a concerning thing. Let's continue. It concluded that Harvard's current grading system is, quote, damaging the academic culture of the college. In the 25-page report, the Dean of Undergraduate Education, Amanda Claybaugh, argued that the rising share of A grades necessitates reforms to, quote, restore the integrity of our grading and return the academic culture of the college to what it was in the recent past. A faculty committee is exploring whether instructors should be able to award a limited number of A-plus grades to undergraduates to crack down on grade inflation, according to the report. The highest grade undergraduates can currently receive is an A. The committee is also considering a proposal to include the median grade for every course on a student's transcript. So, in a sense, what that would be is you get your own grade on the transcript, but then somewhere next to it would be a grade that has to do from the course itself. It says this is the median grade of that course. So did you perform above or below the median? kind of thing would be a good, might be a nice benchmark to see there. I don't know about how I feel about putting that on every student's transcript, to be honest. As much as, I don't know, put it out there somewhere publicly or something like that. That's a conversation for another day. But concern over high grades at Harvard is not new. 2 years ago, Claybaugh presented a report to Harvard's Faculty of Arts and Sciences calling attention to skyrocketing undergraduate marks. A faculty committee concluded in January that undergraduates frequently prioritize other commitments over their classes. That actually goes to this Harvard Crimson article from earlier this year. Faculty report finds Harvard college students, quote, do not prioritize their courses. So reading a little bit from this, Faculty of Arts and Sciences Committee released a report on Friday concluding that many Harvard college students self-censor when discussing controversial topics and frequently prioritize extracurricular commitments over their academics. Now, to that I want to say, yes, it's nice to have extracurricular commitments, and if you can do it, they are very nice extra bonuses to your resume, to your CV, to things like that when you go looking for jobs, you're looking for graduate school, those kinds of things. But your education is your education, and you should not place the extracurricular stuff over your classes and getting your classwork done and making sure you have mastery of the material. This is where grade inflation becomes a concern, because if your grades are inflated, then that means the letter grade that you're getting does not actually reflect your level of mastery of the course material. So let me continue with the other article back here. The latest report was released less than a month after the phenomenon catapulted back into national attention, with a New York Times headline concluding that, quote, Harvard students skip class, and still get high grades. President Donald Trump and White House officials have repeatedly called the intelligence of Harvard's student body into question. That's not appropriate to do, but anyway, I don't agree with them doing that for sure. Don't agree with that. The report drew on years of data on students' grades and course evaluations, as well as surveys of faculty and student leaders conducted this summer. Quote, nearly all faculty expressed serious concern, Claybaugh wrote in the report. They perceive there to be a misalignment between the grades awarded and the quality of student work. Grade inflation has accelerated in the past decade, according to Claybaugh. Since 2015, the proportion of students receiving A grades has risen by 20 percentage points. Where the class of 2015 had a median grade point average of 3.64 at graduation, the class of 2025 clocked in at 3.83. Now, if I recall correctly, I'm not going to remember it off the top of my head, but I believe that so when you graduate as an undergrad, there's levels of honors that are given that are dependent upon your grade that are just tied to your bachelor's degree. They're cum laude, magna cum laude, and summa cum laude. Magna being great and summa being superior. I want to say superior summa cum laude is at 3.75. I can't remember, and so don't quote me on that. I'd have to go look it up. In fact, in a matter of a hot second, Okay, I had to go find it because I just could not remember what it was. But cum laude is a Latin phrase meaning with praise. So if you're graduating cum laude, you're graduating with honors, and it's meant to honor those students who do have a very nice grade point average and did very well, but also didn't get to the top of their class. Above that is magna cum laude, which means with great praise when it's translated. And that's a middle tier. They achieve higher honors than a lot of their peers, but they're still not the tippy tops of their class. Summa cum laude means with highest praise, and that is the pinnacle for undergraduate recognition when you are graduating from your undergraduate degree. And it really depends. Summa cum laude students, it really depends on the college and on the school how they assign that. That can be any number of different things. You get scholarly accomplishments that are really amazing during your undergraduate career, any number of things. You get a high GPA average, really, really high GPA. You get any number of academic honors. Sometimes they do it primarily just on thresholds, but the thresholds can depend upon the college. So looking at, for example, typically a cum laude might start around 3.5 to 3.7 GPA average. Magna cum laude, 3.8, 3.9. Summa cum laude is where you're getting 3.9 and above kind of thing. Into very high things. Often these are the 4.0 students, the valedictorians. Sometimes you'll have additional criteria. So if you're taking honors courses, things like that, class rank is another one, but also credit hours. So it depends a little bit on the university because they do set their own standards for magna cum laude and summa cum laude and all that kind of jazz. So just to make the point there, I didn't want to leave that one hanging and have it wrong. So if you go by that sort of standard of anywhere from 3.5 to 3.7, this would be the median grade point average of students graduating cum laude. 50% of students being above that median. Most of them are graduating cum laude, or half of them are graduating at least cum laude, magna cum laude, or summa cum laude. But this is higher, so 3.83. So if you keep that same threshold of a 3.8 or so being magna cum laude, then now all of a sudden you have at least 50% of the students graduating with great praise, magna cum laude status. So that's what I just wanted to say on that one. Grade inflation began to rise rapidly in the late 2010s, then spiked during the shift to remote instruction during the COVID-19 pandemic, before plateauing in recent years, according to the report. Where Clabo's 2023 report qualified its claims, conceding that rising grades were evidence of grade compression but not necessarily inflation, because students' work may be improving commensurately with their grades, the latest report did not hold back. Quote, "Our grading is too compressed and too inflated, as nearly all faculty recognized. It is also too inconsistent, as students have observed. More importantly, our grading no longer performs its primary functions and is undermining our academic mission." But Clabaugh cautioned against associating grade inflation with a decrease in student effort. Using self-reported data students provide when they submit their semesterly course evaluations, called Q reports, her inquiry found that the amount of time students say they spend on coursework outside of class each week has remained relatively stable over the past 2 decades. Now, how much they say they spend on coursework outside of class. This is where it gets a little dicey, right? Why do I say that? Think of something like in the past 10 years. So let me continue, actually. We'll make that point a little bit better in a second. Workload is notoriously difficult to measure, but our data suggests that students are working as hard as they have ever been, if not more, she wrote. Hours worked have typically fluctuated between 5.5 and 6.5 hours, according to the report. In spring of 2025, the average amount of time students reported was 6.46 compared to 5.85 in 2015. Now, I got a question, because how do you actually measure this? Because the amount of time students say they spend on coursework is the thing here. Is how much time a student says they spend on coursework actually matching what they actually do? And I don't say that to belittle any students. I'm sure there's a lot of students where that's true, and they actually perhaps work more than they say on paper. But there's also probably students that work less than they say on paper. My point is simply, I don't like the whole thing of say they spend on coursework because it's not that students would lie. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm thinking of things like, say you get into a doom scroll on your phone when you're supposed to be studying. Well, suddenly that's time away from actually studying. That does happen. Not belittling students' effort with that. I'm just making a point here that that's not necessarily the best metric of students saying when you're going to have a hard time measuring that being reality. Okay? Nothing there to that. Just merely making a point about the metric, not about the students' efforts. But Clabaugh noted that the Q report does not always align with faculty perceptions of how much their students are working. Some instructors, especially in the humanities and the interpretive social sciences, told her that, quote, they've had to trim some readings and drop others entirely, and that they've had to switch from novels to short stories, and that it's difficult to keep assigning reading in the face of increasing student complaints. This is where it gets interesting to me, and this is where I go back to Deb Filament, my friend over at The Reason We Learn, talking about the fact that even she has noticed, and folks have complained to her, noticing that students are not necessarily wanting to read. And that's before you get to college kind of thing. So this is just a note on that, you know, there could be many reasons why, the grade inflation is happening. Let me put it this way. And some of it could be from faculty, and some of it could be from students, and some of it could be from administrative bullcrap at the same time. I am not going to say here because the report, I don't think, actually pretty explicitly says, other than the fact that the grade inflation part of it is damaging the culture, they don't explicitly say where it's coming from. That is the reason I'm not doing that here with this case of reporting. I will let others do the speculating with that. I tend to like having the data in front of me and having some judgment as to the why of that. So let's see. A fair number of students in reading intensive courses report doing lower than average hours of work outside of class, she wrote. Changes in media consumption on high school curricula may mean Harvard students find it harder to pay sustained attention to complex texts, Clabaugh added. This actually goes to the point that I was making. That Deb, I'm sure Deb would make this point too if she were here right now to read this. But if students aren't reading, and if students aren't, how should I say, having a love of reading developed, it's going to be harder to pay attention. That, and you're in the thing of flip through, low attention. Parents, please, for the love of all things holy, keep your kid away from cell phones and social media for as long as you possibly can, preferably until they are maybe just about to go to college, and you've drilled it into them that it's good to be academics focused on your studies and learning how to focus in deeply on tasks for a long period of time rather than flipping through your phone or any of those kinds of things. Please keep your students away from that. That is one big part of the problem, is it's like short attention span, 30-second video, that's all I can watch. Note that you need a decent amount of attention and focus to be able to read things through. And, so that's one part of the problem right there. And that goes to a larger cultural issue. That's also not going to be helpful when you're talking about the next generation of scientists, where you got to be dedicated and focused working on a research project or writing a paper or writing a grant proposal or any number of things at that point. And no, AI can't do it for you. That's a whole other conversation, but they can't do it for you. She attributed pressure to assign higher grades in part to the college's course evaluation system. Instructors worry that giving out lower grades will result in less positive reviews, hindering their future job prospects, she wrote, while students have exerted their own increasingly litigious pressure on instructors to raise grades. Yeah, the college has got to step up and protect the professor on that one. Anyway, she also connected the shift in efforts from the college to encourage instructors to be sensitive to students who enter Harvard with limited high school preparation. Quote, for the past decade or so, the college has been exhorting faculty to remember that some students arrive less prepared for college than others, she wrote. Unsure how best to support their students, many have simply become more lenient. Claybaugh's report concluded with recommendations for combating grade inflation. She suggested instructors clearly communicate the quality of work required for a particular grade and consider instituting in-person sit-down exams. That's not the thing right now. Are all these exams being done on Moodle? See, this is why I don't like this is where I have problems with online systems like Canvas and Moodle and what have you. If you were doing the exams there, immensely easy to cheat. Immensely easy to cheat at this point, and then the students aren't mastering the material. And she gets to my thing, what I was making a point about with AI. Seated exams are prudent in this age of generative AI, she wrote. They are also useful for encouraging students to engage with all course materials, and they tend to produce a broader distribution of grades. Clabaugh also advocated for working to standardize grading between different sections of the same course, writing that students are often troubled by inconsistency in grading by different teaching fellows. So, what this is about, for those of you who might be a little unfamiliar, sometimes you have gen ed classes with freshmen and sophomores and what have you, and there can be hundreds of students taking that course. So there's multiple sections taught by multiple professors, but all of those professors and their TAs, oftentimes, are responsible for grading those particular sections. That's where you can get inconsistencies in grading with those particular kinds of classes, those big classes where you have hundreds of students taking the same class at a time. This is not true necessarily of the upper level courses where you do only have one professor who's teaching that class and sets out the grading requirements. So I'm sure that could happen too. Sometimes there are on those upper level classes, but often that's mostly the lower level courses where that's the case. The report also outlined potential changes to Harvard's grading system, like awarding A+ grades, though it noted that any major revisions would require a faculty vote. Quote, permitting faculty to award a limited number of A pluses in each course would increase the information our grades provide by distinguishing the very best students, Clayball wrote. She wrote that the committee was also investigating the effects of putting each course's median grade on a student's transcript and creating a variance-based grading system for internal use. The report did not offer any further information on what such a system might look like. Now, I want to go back to the Twitter post here from Steve McGuire, because he's got up here some of the images from the report. So when they were talking about the issues with grade inflation, right here, 20 some odd percent to 60 some odd percent spike right here. This is pandemic times. I believe that's the 2020-2021 academic year, which most everybody was remote for their university practices at that time. Median GPA going here from, this is 1985 right here, where the median is, this line right here is like a 3.3 something like that, to the 3.8 something that it is now. Those kinds of things also in here. Yep. Ruining undergraduate culture because students choose courses based on grade expectations rather than interest, are more stressed out as they try to distinguish themselves in other ways. Say academics feel fake because there's no sense of achievement. Honest to goodness, if you're just getting an A for showing up, that kind of thing, that's the extreme. But if you're just getting an A for showing up, there is no achievement there. And it does feel fake. Honest to goodness, I loved the courses that challenged me. I was tickled pink. Tell you a story. I was tickled pink in a dynamics exam I had in college in my graduate school years, but we had senior undergrads in that class too. I think an atmospheric dynamics course. And I love that class. And you know why I love that class? It challenged me. It pushed me hard. Every single person flunked the midterm exam. I think the class average was a 33 or a 30%. And class average was a 30%. Everybody flunked. I worked my butt off. I worked so damn hard. I got the high score on the final exam. It was a 75, but I got the high score on the final exam. There was achievement there, and I was damn proud of that. I still am damn proud of that. I think I also got the high score on a different exam in a different class, and so close to getting an A. I was peeved that I didn't get an A in that. So close, but I was still so proud of myself. If it's a challenge that you succeed at, if it's a challenge and you work hard and you put in this and you get a damn good grade, you try so hard. And most professors, if you are trying damn hard and you're going to them and you're asking for help and you're doing this and you're doing that, they will see that and know that when they're grading a student. They really, really will. Been my experience working. It was my experience in college for sure. I know this experience of many other students that I've was alongside at the time. You work damn hard on things, and particularly in the really hard classes like, atmospheric physics and atmospheric chemistry and all of those kinds of things, alongside just regular chemistry and physics and differential equations and calculus. I remember those classes, man. They were tough. I had to work damn hard. I didn't do all that many extracurricular things, except for work. I had a work-study thing myself, so I was working. And going through college at the same time. I didn't have a whole lot of scholarships or anything like that to work with. Made it my way through. You can do it. And I can understand why students would say in the report that it feels fake, because it doesn't feel like you're achieving anything if you just get the grade that easily. So I'm going to leave it here because this has already gotten to be a bit of a long video. Whoops, that's the wrong one. But I encourage you to go read this, and if you do get the opportunity, I will provide the top level link here for Steve McGuire's post, because it is an excellent thing to read about. And the question I want to leave everybody with this is, how do you, there is an argument to be had that maybe giving letter grades isn't the best way to measure mastery. Prime example, the concerns about grade inflation being what they are. Some employers, particularly in things like computer science or in other types of disciplines where you have to do a lot of programming and coding, as part of their interview process, they will give you a skills-based test where you have to sit in front of them and code something in particular to show that you have the skills, not necessarily of a specific language, but of the logical progression of how to do programming a particular model or a particular analysis or something like that, or following the logic train, getting the logic right, because logic errors in programming are often the problem, more so than the syntax errors. Syntax errors, you know right away because the program breaks. Logic errors, the program will work, but you'll get weird results, and you'll be wondering, like, what the hell went wrong? That kind of thing. But instituting a skills-based exam as an employer for any potential employees, so you know you're hiring somebody who knows what they're doing in the things that you are worried about and the things that you are concerned about. That is one such thing that is being considered. We need skills-based testing as part of employment if grading doesn't work. Well, okay, if letter grading doesn't work very well, what other ways do we grade? No, it's not the student's self-grading. Sorry, that doesn't work. Somebody does have to give some kind of judgment on the student's ability and mastery of material. Because, what is it? The students give their own grade as to how well. I've heard that floated out there from some of the more left-leaning groups, I believe. But that doesn't necessarily demonstrate mastery of material either. That is the concern. If you're going into something like physics, chemistry, or fields where a lot of those kinds of physical science things are involved, you do have to have some mastery of material and physical understanding of certain things. Meteorology, hydrology, oceanography, geology, any number of these different kinds of things, ecology. Understanding of physics, natural sciences is a must. And so when the grade doesn't reflect the student's ability and mastery, that's when we start having to ask the question, well, how do we check whether or not a student knows what they're doing when they're coming in? Now, this is not to say that students aren't working hard. I know a lot of very hardworking students. This is not a knock on them. But we do have to ask the question of the grade inflation. What the heck is going on? And how do we fix it to make sure that the grades that we see and the GPAs that we see are representative of the mastery that students have over the material that for which they are getting a degree. And particularly in the sciences in there. Now, as far as graduate school is concerned, I can speak from my own experience on that. A GPA is only part of it. You do go take things like the graduate record exam, for example, the GRE as an entrance exam for graduate schools, and that's another metric to measure. And I think it was in one of the other threads related to this piece that there was a comment on SAT scores related to the GPAs. Opposite directions from what I remember, but I can't remember that particular ex post or tweet or whatever the heck it was. But anyway, that's the kind of question I have. When we're talking about training the next generation of students for sciences in particular, what is the appropriate and best way to measure a student's mastery of material? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button on the way out the door, comment on the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, all the lovely good jazz. Till next time, I'm Adrian. May you stay curious.
And a very happy Halloween.